Hi guys, welcome to another Revamp podcast episode. My name is Carol and this is my brother Daniel. And if you don't know us already, we're siblings in business.
Thank you for making that clarification because a lot of people do ask what we are. But speaking of which, what are we going to be talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about how to stay calm during business disaster. Cue the suspense sound effect. I guess we could start with okay, what would you even consider a business disaster?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea to just jump straight into it. I think a business disaster is something that either constitutes a huge hit for you financially, huge hit for you leadership-wise, or a huge hit for you systematically. So any of those things, I mean, it depends on your business, it depends on your industry, what they may look like. But whenever you take a big hit that changes your daily operations, that changes the way you see your day-to-day work life, that's a big hit.
Just completely disrupts you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's cool today, we're going to be talking about we're going to be going over actual businesses, a few examples of how they managed to get into disasters and how they made it happen to still stand today.
I think it's always important to have real life examples because you can read about it all you want to, but when you hear about companies, like I know some of them are, FedEx, Tesla, Amazon. These are some of the companies that had a time where we probably wouldn't be knowing them the way we know them today had they not made the decisions that they made.
Yeah. And I think, as entrepreneurs, it's inevitable to not have hiccups. It's inevitable to not have these disasters or these crises, right?
Yeah. I think it's not a matter of if, but when. And I think the most important thing to ask yourself is when those times come, how do you respond to that? One thing that I think I've learned in the season is through perception, it's so important. If you don't believe in your business and you don't believe that things are going to get better, that transmits in everything. It is so important that you get a hold of not just yourself, but how you carry yourself in that season to really point you guys in the direction of being able to overcome whatever troubles you may be having.
Okay, so how would you say you've maintained, or how would you say your posture has been of when you started up until today, now that you have, experience under your belt of when things are falling apart?
I think experience is just something that comes naturally. Like when you do something enough times and you build a confidence for yourself, you understand these things. And once you understand that, I think it allows you to kind of know what seasons it's in. I think typically for us, we've been in business 3 years already. And we know that towards the end of the year, towards Q4, it's usually when clients start to back out a little bit. They don't spend as much time on projects. They kind of put marketing on the backside of things because they're trying to catch up and make sure everything's okay. The beginning of the year is usually when we get more business. Now, this is something that once it happens, it could be a coincidence. Twice, you start to see a pattern. 3 times, and it's like, okay, you have to accept that this is what the industry is. What do you do to put in practice so you know that you'll be prepared for those times when they're hard?
Right. Becoming proactive rather than reactive.
Exactly. And that's so important, right? Being able to understand problems are going to happen, but how do you respond to them? What do you think is one of the biggest struggles that you wish somebody would have mentioned to you before getting into business?
I think that expecting struggle. Like as an entrepreneur, I was like, oh, la, 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 I'm just going to be a business owner. And again, highlighting the freedom of time that everyone is just like, oh, that's why I want to be a business owner because I don't want to schedule time out. I don't want to ask for permission, when I need to pick up and go. But I think that no one really talks about the struggles.
Yeah.
And so I think, like you mentioned earlier, if you change your perspective of it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
Because I think, with us, even in freelance, because for me, it's like it was easier to manage because it's just a one solo, I was writing solo. But now with you, there's more responsibility. There's a team that, we oversee, and it just adds to that responsibility, not only business-wise, but as leaders.
Yeah.
And so your role as a leader, there's more pressure to that role.
Yeah.
So I would say, I wish someone would have kind of made a reality of, and then again, to be honest, I didn't really look for much mentors. I kind of just jumped the gun and was like, well, I'll see for myself what this is. And so now I would advise people when jumping into, entrepreneurship in general, like just expect that things aren't going to go the way that you plan.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's a bad thing because from that comes growth.
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned in this season is the balance of things, right? You need to understand the balance of being able to fake it till you make it, but also understanding like vulnerability. I think it is naive, and I think it's also to a degree irresponsible to act like you have everything figured out. There's no problems, there's no issues, there's no nothing. Laying caution to the wind when everything is going bad.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you have to make yourself vulnerable. You have to have those conversations with people, with mentors that you're talking about, to be able to help in those seasons when you're hard. But if everything's always okay, if everything's always going to be all right, you never give yourself that season to be able to understand, like, where can I grow? Where can I improve? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
If you always believe everything's going to pan out, everything's going to work out, that's not bad per se, but it also robs you of the ability to learn, robs you of the ability to be like, okay, what do I need to look at internally to be able to fix?
Yeah.
On the flip side of things, if you're always thinking about everything's wrong, everything's going, you're not going to get very far as an entrepreneur, because it is so important that you not only keep the optimism alive, but that you believe it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying fake it till you make it, but also don't just, oh man, woe is me. And this is never going to get better, but being able to find that balance. And I think the examples you're going to bring up are people who were able to exemplify being strong and having a good kind of head on their shoulders when these problems were arising.
Right. I think also, before we get into those examples, what would you say was a moment of crisis for Revamp for you that, made you realize like, oh my gosh, this is the end. And then we were able to come up from that.
Yeah, I think in full transparency, I think it was about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, we had an issue where we lost about 40% of our client. Well, we lost one client who was 60% of our business.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, we really had to look internally and be like, well, what do we need to change? And it's not that we were complacent with how things were, but we hadn't prepared enough time to have a system in place for what we knew was going to happen.
Right.
And I think in that time, it's hard because you're now forced, right? Your fight or flight kicks in. You're like, you need to figure this out.
Survival mode.
Exactly. And like I said, full transparency, we threw a Hail Mary where we hired an agency to help us out with like getting inbound and outbound calls through cold email marketing and stuff like that. That was able to help us generate, more than what we had before.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that going. And, unfortunately, over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, that died down. And, we're not in the same position we were last year.
Yeah.
But it's put us in a position where we're similar to last year. We have to take a look at ourselves and be like, hey, what are we doing wrong that we now have to reposition ourselves to not let this happen?
Yeah.
We know the end of the season is going to be hard. We know that this season, it seems to be an every year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we prepare ourselves to keep things going?
Exactly.
And I think that's conversations that we've been having for the last couple of months, where it's not a surprise that it happened. We kind of saw it coming. But how do we implement and be proactive with these sort of problems? There are some things that are out of your control. There's some things that you can't control. But the one thing that you can control is your perspective on it. And if you're able to kind of see everything as a problem, that like, how can I solve this? Or what can I do? What can I control and what I can't? It is easier said than done. And I'm telling you this personally, accepting that there's nothing that you can do in certain areas and letting that go is half the battle. If there's something that can be done and you can do it, then go and do it. But if there isn't, don't kill yourself over, man, I'm not doing this, man, I can't do this, or comparing anybody around you. Focus on what you have control of, and that'll allow you to get into the next season of life with a clear mind.
Now's a good time to kind of transition us. Let's look at a few examples of the big businesses that have had to deal with crisis and have had to deal with like things falling apart. But like you mentioned, their reaction is really what made, their business stay afloat.
So in the 90s, Marvel decided to file for bankruptcy due to bad business decision making, overspending, and also just comic book sales being not a marketable thing in the 90s. The biggest way that Marvel was able to shift out of that was changing their mindset from just a comic book sort of entry to having Marvel Studios, whereas they generated movies, and that has clearly shown to be such a huge success for them, going way farther than just comic books.
Okay, another example is Lego. Why did it nearly flop? So by 2003, Lego was nearing bankruptcy after years of product over expansion, poor financial management, and staying too far from its core product, which was the actual Lego brick. It wasn't until Lego refocused on its core brick products, cut back on unnecessary themes, and collaborated with franchises like Star Wars, Harry Potter, and they also expanded into movies, video games, and that's really what made their brand revive.
Yeah, that licensing makes sense.
Yeah, so similar to Marvel, you know, where it's not so much of the product itself anymore, like Marvel being comic books, Lego being the brick. It's like, how can we expand to be something more?
Yeah, it's just using a different channel, right? It's not reinventing the wheel. It's not like they stopped selling Legos and started selling something else. It's very important to pivot and be able to understand, like, how do you keep this going? By the way, when's the last time you played with Legos?
I don't know. I think I stepped on them before I played with it.
So I know before, some of you may have heard the term Netflix and chill. There was a thing called Blockbuster, and that was Netflix's competition. And back in 2000s, Netflix was struggling to compete with them. And their decision to separate from DVD rental and streaming services in 2011, it actually caused confusion and backlash, and it hurt their stock price initially. But how did they get out of it? Netflix was able to provide fully streaming services. And the biggest thing that they did, though, was that they started making original content. And that was a huge risk for them. But if you've seen any sort of original Netflix stuff, like that is the best stuff that's on Netflix. Stranger Things, shout out. Waiting for season 5.
Yeah, me too.
But that's what helped Netflix. And now, you know, it's a whole different thing. And you have to stream everything. But they started a trend where now everyone is trying to move to a streaming platform to be able to keep up with demand.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see, though, in a couple of years, is it finally going to come back to a place? Because now it's kind of like cable. You need to have 5-6 different types of streaming services just to watch one show.
Yeah.
You try to watch a show, you're like, what is it on? Is it on Hulu? Is it on Netflix? Is it on Paramount? Like, bro,
yes.
You got to share passwords with friends. Like, I'll give you my Paramount, you give me your Hulu.
Yeah. So the last example we have is Starbucks. In 2008, because you know the financial crisis that you know everyone went through.
Don't have a house.
Wasn't the Great Depression, but yeah.
Might as well be. You're not getting a house anytime soon.
That's when the millennials got screwed over with the houses. But anyways, so when the financial crisis hit for Starbucks, they had a decline in sales, over expansion. You know, they even had a few stores close. And the company faced pressure to cut costs and refocus its operations. But at a literal crisis, like, you know, Starbucks had to go through, how did they come out of it? It wasn't until, similar like Apple, it wasn't until the CEO came back, Howard Schultz. And I think I'm pronouncing it right. So he returned and he focused on customer experience. He focused on closing unperforming stores and innovating their menu with premium products. And so Starbucks streamlined operations, reconnected with customers, and ended up rebounding successfully.
You know, it's interesting, off topic, on topic. How many people actually like Starbucks, or is it they just get it because it's the most convenient thing? Because I know this girl, you know, she's not a huge fan of Starbucks. She gets it if it's there, but it's not something you go out of your way to get.
If you are a real OG coffee drinker, like coffee fiend like I am, Starbucks is not your go-to. Starbucks is purely out of convenience. But the coffee, I rather go to like Pete's or, you know, one of those mom and pop coffee shops. That's
a little hipster when it comes to coffee. I don't drink any coffee, so I don't really got a fight. I don't have a dog in the fight, but it's very interesting to see how Starbucks can be so big. Yeah. But at the same time, it's kind of lost that niche coffee drinker like yourself.
Because it's so big.
Right, but they're making money. So
I mean, look at In-N-Out. They maintain their quality.
That's true.
Because they're not over expanding.
You know who hasn't maintained their quality?
Who?
Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah. Chick-fil-A is different now.
It is. I think it really did have to do something about the chickens and stuff like that. But anyways, that's conversation for another day.
Yeah, but what were you going to ask me before?
So after talking about the examples that we talked about, I guess my question to you would be, personally, what do you feel that you pivoted that has helped you just maybe see differently or interact differently or your operations differently that has been like, man, this has been a game changer for me?
So a moment for, for us as a business, I think because I was so used to creating content as a freelancer, photographer, videographer, that was my main focus for so many years of just, oh, make
Yeah.
the content look pretty.
Yeah.
But then teaming up with you, we quickly realized, oh, wow, it has to be more than the content. What other value are you providing to the client?
Yeah.
Because now we're B2B, right? And how business owners are looking at, okay, I'm investing in you. How am I seeing that return on the investment, ROI? How am I seeing this ROI? And we really had to ask ourselves, like, shoot, will we pay for this? If, it's not just about pretty content, it has to be more than that. And so I think we had to reposition ourselves, our thinking, our values, and really like, okay, take a step back and restructure everything in-house to be able to.
I would challenge what you're saying with yes. Obviously you could have business. There's businesses out there who literally just focus on content creation.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of what we wanted to do and the direction we wanted to grow and how we wanted to go about it, we had to change things up. And I don't think it was a huge change as far as like, oh my gosh, we need to change this or this, but it did change our perspective on like how can we have numbers back up what we're showing, right? How can we show traffic? How can we show leads? How can we show that we're understanding things? And even our metrics, right? I think one thing we talked about last time was, so instead of focusing on followers, right? Focusing on how do we create leads? How do we implement ourselves into your business to where it's not just content creation, it's a marketing plan.
Yeah.
And that's what we shifted ourselves, right? And that requires not so much giving up the content creation, but being more intentional with it and doing more legwork on our end as far as like, how do we strategize that? Right. Mm-hmm. You came from a place where it's like you were told, hey, I need this, make it look pretty. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, you're the expert, figure it out.
Yeah.
And it comes with its pros and cons, right? Because it gives you more creative liberty, but then it also requires more work for you to be able to understand, like, I need to really understand my client to provide them with the content that they need and understand the industry to be able to create more value for them.
Yeah, for sure. But when you ask like, oh, to me, that was a pivotal moment for me where I realized, oh, wow, I'm thinking about this too small. I had that freelance business owner mentality, not a marketing agency business mentality where it's a lot bigger.
Yeah. And as your role gets bigger, it's interesting because your responsibilities come different. Like, I think it's so cool to see you now. Maybe you don't shoot or edit as much as you used to, but you still oversee all the content and you have to put your stamp of approval. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because I can tell when you've overseen something and when you haven't. Like when there's this quality of work that you have, it's kind of like you watermark it with your style. You watermark it with like the edit, even though you don't necessarily edit it. Your vision and your eye is something that I believe that's what people pay for, right? And being able to showcase that and showcase that we can help elevate your business while doing so, that's what's helping us kind of develop what we want to. The hard part, not even the hard part, the season we're in now is trying to communicate that value to businesses and finding businesses that appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's probably a conversation we'll have for another day.
Yeah.
But finding clients who, it may not be that your offer is wrong. It may just be the people you're pitching to are not the right demographic you want to work with.
Yeah. And that was us for a long time.
Yeah.
A very long time. But we found, I think it's taken us maybe like 3 years to really hone down on establishing a foundation within us internally, understanding who we are. And then, okay, now that we understand us more and what we can do and where we want to go, let's, start looking for that.
Yeah, I think as we've evolved over the last 3 years, we've gotten better. We've polished certain skill sets. Now it's like, what direction do we want to go in and how do we make that happen? Right. There's certain things that we got to focus on and be like, how can we provide more value in these areas for the clients that we want to work with? Mm-hmm. And I think those things kind of weed themselves out. Like, unfortunately, some clients we've either outgrown or they want to go in a different direction and we part ways. And it's not, there's no bad blood there. That's business at the end of the day. But you want to make sure that you're spending your time and your efforts. Don't focus so much on like, oh man, I'm not working with that client anymore because X, Y, and Z. It's like, what is the client I want to work with and continue to work with? What do they look like? And how can I add more value to that?
Yeah. How to keep calm during this business disaster that you may be going through or you will go through actually.
Yeah.
And so how it's not, again, it's not if, but when. And so we just kind of want to give you guys with these 5, main points on how to keep calm during that. So step 1 would be staying calm no matter how crazy and how like, if how much it feels like the world's falling apart in your business. It's always recommended that you just take a breather, because every time we've panicked, it's just you don't end up doing things right. You can't think properly. And one of the things that always stuck out to me that you've told me before is the problem is never the problem.
Yeah.
And can you expand a little bit on what that means?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, you're so fixated on what the issue is that it's really, there's always something underlying, like something as far as like, let's say you get upset because you spilled coffee on yourself. That's probably not really what you're upset about. Sure, that's annoying. That's a problem in of itself, but you're probably upset because you're late to that meeting. And then you have to spill this coffee and you're afraid about having to change and then it's going to make you even more late and all these things. And it's like your mind goes more to like, what is the bigger thing? And you need to focus on like, what is the actual problem at hand?
Yeah.
And how do you target that?
Right. And within that problem, try staying calm. It's like, okay, take a breather. Okay, what is the actual issue here? Right? Like how can I trace back to what the problem is, the main problem? And then from there, what steps do you have to take to address the problem?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's the solution, but how, like, help yourself take those first steps to help you get to the solution. So I would say, just staying calm in that process. And from there, right, like any mistake you made, right, as a business owner, you're not going to make all the right decisions. No. I think the important part is making a decision.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, well, guess what? You at least tried something than not doing anything at all.
I think it's so funny that we're polar opposites, where as far as like, you're willing to, go ahead and make a decision. Yeah. I'm like, should I not? And I think that both can be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
If you're too impulsive with your decisions, that's something you got to look out for. But if you're too stagnant and you wait for the perfect opportunity, you're going to be waiting a while.
Right.
So finding that balance is very important.
Yeah. And so I think, to pin it back, so when you stay calm, but also focus on your core strengths, right? So what is it that you are good at? What is it that you are doing right? And so from there, because we looked at, the examples, they had to look at, it wasn't so much the product, right? But it's how they were presenting it, maybe. It's like, or maybe it's internally, like really analyze what is going on. And then you are who you are as a business, and you have your strengths and you have your core values. And if you don't have core values, well, now's a good time to, really determine that. But really think about, okay, what am I good at? What are we doing right? And how can we continue, working on that?
So step 2 is innovation, right? How do you look at your current industry, or how do you look at your current business model and think, how can I change this to fit the mold that I needed to get to where I need to?
Yeah.
The examples we gave is Marvel to Marvel Studios, Starbucks to creating premium products. You talked about Netflix and being able to create a subscription model, right? And Legos and being able to integrate themselves with licensing rights to be able to work with people that want to work with.
Yeah.
Those are things that aren't necessarily, you think of that and you're like, that's not necessarily game changing, but that is innovative steps that allow you long term to be able to see a plan that's going to make you successful in the long run.
Yeah. And then based off of that, right? Like, who would have thought like the Netflix would now change the industry in streaming?
Yeah.
So like, you never know what those steps will actually lead you to, like a bigger outcome.
I think step 3 is marketing adaptability. It's similar to innovation, but it's different in the sense of understand what the industry around you is doing, right? I think a perfect example of this is Snapchat. When Snapchat started doing daily stories, or that was their business model, Instagram had to hop on that, take it and run with it. There was so many changes where the consumer style of us, how we take social media, it has to be quick. It has to be something that people don't spend a lot of time with. And so how do you adapt to that market? It's not necessarily innovative, but you're able to adapt it. And now Instagram, I mean, if you're over 25, you should not have a Snapchat. Honestly, 22, leave that behind. But Instagram has created, they took that concept of having something that goes away after 24 hours or goes away after a limited amount of time, and we're able to build off of that. And you've seen some industries try, I don't know if you saw those apps that were like for a while, they were trying to come up. I don't even know the name of some of them, but they were
Like be the next Instagram?
Be Real. Be Real was one of
Oh,
them.
Be
Be Real
Real.
was one of them. Like there was a couple of them out there that tried to do a similar concept.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they got the traction.
Yeah.
But they tried to adapt, right? And not all businesses are success stories. But
You know which one I really admire though the most? TikTok. I remember TikTok would be their marketing. They dumped everything
dude,
on their marketing
when you want to
before
talk about
even. I honestly admire
Yeah.
how much they marketed
Yeah.
TikTok before it actually became a thing.
I actually know somebody who uses TikTok as a search engine. Like that's insane. When I talk
Yeah.
to them, I'm like, hey, you want to do this, you want to do that? They'll be like, oh, let me look it up on TikTok and see what they say. Like a Yelp, like a Google. And the way that they're going, TikTok, I think it has very much the capability of being able to adapt to that market.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. Even how they're creating or even how they are paying their creators is something that they're adapting to be able to keep people on the platform. Because if you remember Vine, I know that was a big thing that why people didn't want to continue to use it. There was no money. Creators weren't incentivized to continue to use the platform. And there's a lot of different reasons why it wasn't, able to continue. But being able to adapt to the market.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. The fourth step is just remaining resilient and sticking to your long-term vision and goal as a business. Because, I hear a lot of people say, going back to your purpose. What is your purpose?
What is your why?
What is your why?
Yeah.
And that is so important within these critical crisis moments where you panic. It's like, stay calm, take a step back, breathe. Why are you doing this in the first place? And then have that be your fuel to keep going.
Yeah.
Don't try to cut corners. Don't try to, make decisions out of that panic, but instead, okay, again, stick to your core values, stick to what you want to do long term. And, there are short-term decisions that you can make, but make those decisions based off of the long-term outcome.
Yeah. I think the last step and probably the most important step, at least for me and what the season that we've been in and we have been in the past, is taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You need to take care of yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. I think that's something that people tend to neglect, where you get so caught up with everything, fixing things. And again, the problem is not the problem, right? Even if your business becomes successful, you're going to be on this constant wheel of stress, constant wheel of anxiousness, constant wheel of, well, if I get this amount of clients or I get this amount of money, the problems are still going to be there. So in these moments, don't forget to take care of yourself spiritually, mentally, and physically. Take care of your mental health, take care of your body, take care of what goes in and outside of yourself. Make sure that you're able to cling on to yourself in these moments and understand who you are. Because in these moments, you are going to be tested. Your value is going to be tested. You're going to question yourself as like, am I who I think I am? And I'm not saying your confidence should be in your business or whatever it may be, but if it is contingent off of your business, the ebbs and flows of the entrepreneurship life is going to rattle you. And I think that that's something that you need to be able to have your value outside of just a business, outside of just monetary value. And again, take care of yourself in all areas. Don't make just one thing dependent off of who your value is, but make sure that in these moments when you're really low, you sit with yourself, you spend time with yourself and understand who you are. That'll help you in this, because at the end of the day, nothing's guaranteed. If your business fails or if it becomes successful, are you still going to be who you are?
So in summary, what we can take from all of these businesses is staying flexible, embracing change, adapting to the market, and also taking care of yourself. As you could see, we all struggle in business.
Yeah.
There's no good cookie cutter solution to things. Everyone's running their own race. Even the big companies, even the ones that you think, they made it, they got it. It's like, no, they endure problems on a daily.
Yeah.
And I guess with that, we just want to encourage you guys that you're not alone in feeling these disappointments or feeling like, oh my gosh, will my business survive? That's something I think all entrepreneurs end up wrestling with, like finding ways to survive.
I think my concluding thoughts would be like, even beyond business, even if you're not a business owner, if you believe in something strong enough, continue to work at it and don't give up until you've exhausted every possible resource. Just keep on pushing through, even when things are not going your way. If you really believe in it, give it your all.
And one of the things I think I've learned with our journey is even at our lowest points, I feel like we have been able to find ways to come up. And that's where the growth happens, and that's where confidence happens. Yeah, thank God, by the grace of God. By the grace of God. But really, like, it teaches you, like, wow, when you're pressed up against the corner and you're on survival mode, you really realize, like, wow, like, if it weren't because of that, I wouldn't have learned what I did. Yeah, guys, so that concludes our episode on how to keep calm during business disasters. Catch us on the next time. Or
catch us on the next time.
Catch us on the next one.